I don't know why I agreed to it. Maybe it was pride, maybe just the pressure of the group. Either way, I found myself lacing up my boots at the trailhead at nearly midnight, watching our breath curl into the cold autumn air. Full moon, clear sky, no problem, Jake had said earlier. It's the best time for a night hike. I wasn't so sure. There was something about the woods at night that never sat right with me. I'd been hiking these trails for years, but always in daylight when the shadows weren't so long, when the silence wasn't so deep. The others, Jake, Liv, and Eric, were all excited, laughing as they checked their gear. I forced a grin, adjusting my headlamp, even though Jake swore we wouldn't need them. "Moonlight's enough," he said. The first few steps onto the trail felt normal enough, but something about the air had changed. It wasn't just cold, it felt heavier. The sounds of the night should have been comforting, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, but instead, they felt intrusive, like we weren't supposed to be here. Still, I swallowed my nerves and followed the others. I wish I had turned back right then. We moved deeper into the woods, our boots crunching over fallen leaves. Jake was right about the moon. It hung huge and pale overhead, spilling silver light through the trees. Our headlamps stayed off, but I kept mine around my neck, just in case. For the first half-mile, the hike felt almost normal. We talked, joked, tried to ignore the eerie way the trees cast long, twisted shadows across the trail. But the further we went, the quieter the forest became. At first, I didn't notice it. I was too focused on Liv complaining about how her boyfriend who was supposed to come had bailed last minute. But then Eric stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Jake and Liv kept going, but I paused beside him. "Hear what?" "Exactly," he whispered. No rustling leaves. No chirping insects. No distant owl. Just the four of us standing there, breathing in the cold night air. Liv laughed nervously. "Guys, come on. It's just..." Then we heard it. A branch snapping somewhere off the trail. Not close. But not far either. We all froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Probably a deer," Jake said, but for the first time, he didn't sound so sure. Then, another crack. Closer this time. Something was in the woods with us. Jake tried to play it cool, but I could see the tension in his shoulders as he turned back to us. "It's fine," he muttered. "Could be a raccoon, a fox." Another snap. Louder. Closer. My pulse pounded in my ears. "That's not a raccoon," I whispered. Eric reached for his flashlight, but Jake shook his head. "No lights," he hissed. "If it's an animal, we don't want to startle it." Liv grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. "I don't like this." Neither did I. For a long, breathless moment, we stood frozen, listening. The woods were still impossibly silent. I wanted to believe it was just some harmless animal, but something in my gut told me otherwise. Then, just as I was about to suggest turning back, I saw it. A shape. Deep in the trees, maybe 20, 30 feet off the trail. Tall. Unmoving. Just standing there. I couldn't make out any details in the pale moonlight, but the shape was unmistakable. A person. Watching us. I sucked in a sharp breath and grabbed Eric's sleeve. "Do you see that?" He followed my gaze, squinting into the dark. His face went pale. "There's someone out there," he murmured. Jake and Liv turned, their eyes scanning the trees. And then, the figure moved. Not towards us. Not away. Just slightly, like it was shifting its weight. Like it wanted us to know it was there. A slow, creeping dread curled around my spine. "We need to go," Liv whispered. For once, Jake didn't argue. We turned back the way we came, walking fast, trying to act like we weren't completely terrified. But as we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still there. Still watching. Still waiting. We picked up the pace, our breaths coming quicker, forming small clouds in the cold night air. No one spoke. No one joked. The only sound was the crunch of our boots against the dirt trail. I wanted to believe we were imagining things. Maybe it was just a tree, or a trick of the moonlight. But I knew better. Eric had seen it too. And I swear, just before we turned, I thought I saw something else, something subtle but unmistakable. A tilt of the head. Like it was acknowledging us. Like it was enjoying this. Liv was practically glued to my side, her fingers still clenched around my arm. "Are we almost back?" she whispered. Jake didn't answer. His usual confidence had drained from his face, replaced with something else. Something I'd never seen before. Fear. The trail should have been easy to follow, one straight shot back to the parking lot. We hadn't made any turns. We hadn't gone off trail. But after another 10 minutes of fast walking, something was wrong. The trees felt denser. The trail narrower. The moonlight didn't reach us as easily anymore, swallowed by thick branches overhead. Jake stopped so fast I nearly bumped into him. "This isn't right," he muttered. Eric pulled out his phone, turning on the GPS. He frowned. Tapped the screen. Shook his head. "No service." "Just check the trail map," Liv said. He held up his phone, flipping it toward us. The screen was frozen on a loading symbol. Jake cursed under his breath. "We didn't turn anywhere, did we?" "No," I said. "We went straight back. Same way we came." Then why did the woods feel different? Something cold slid through my gut, a realization I didn't want to admit. The forest wasn't the same anymore. Liv was shaking. "Guys, where the hell are we?" We weren't lost. We couldn't be. But the path beneath our feet looked narrower, more overgrown, like it hadn't been walked in years. And then, I noticed something else. The sounds. Or rather, the lack of them. Before, the silence had felt unnatural. But now it felt absolute. No wind. No leaves rustling. Not even the sound of our own footsteps seemed to carry right. Like the forest was swallowing every noise we made. Then, a whisper. Faint. Distant. Impossible to tell where it came from. I turned sharply, heart hammering. "Did you hear that?" Liv whimpered. Eric cursed. Jake's eyes were wide. Then it came again. A slow, dragging sound. Not a voice this time. Something else. Something moving. And it was getting closer. We broke into a run. It wasn't planned. No one shouted go. No one counted to 3. It was pure instinct, the kind of fear that hits the base of your spine and tells you to move before your brain can catch up. Branches slapped my arms. My breath came in ragged gasps. The trail twisted beneath my feet, the trees blurring into a mess of shadows and silver light. And still, that sound followed. A slow, deliberate dragging. Not footsteps. Not an animal. Something heavier. Something wrong. Jake was ahead, Liv beside me, Eric somewhere close behind. I didn't know where we were running to, only that we needed to get away. Then, the path ended. Just stopped. 1 second, we were on the trail. The next, we weren't. We skidded to a stop, barely avoiding tumbling into thick underbrush. Jake spun in a circle, panting. "What the hell? Where's the trail?" No one answered. Because there was no trail. Not behind us. Not ahead. Just trees. Thick, gnarled, ancient. The kind I swore hadn't been here before. Eric turned, wild-eyed. "No. No, this isn't possible." He held up his phone again, but the screen was black now. "Dead. We just ran straight," Liv whimpered. "We didn't." Then we heard it. Not behind us. Above us. A sharp intake of breath. A wet, rattling exhale. I snapped my head up. And I saw myself. Not a reflection. Not a shadow. A figure clinging to the trunk of a tree 20 feet above us. And it had my face. The others saw it too. Liv's breath hitched. Eric staggered back. Jake made a strangled noise deep in his throat. It wasn't exactly me. The proportions were off. The mouth was too wide. The limbs too long. But the eyes. They were my eyes. It tilted its head. The same way the figure in the woods had earlier. Then, in a voice that was almost but not quite mine, it whispered, "You don't belong here." Something in my mind cracked. Like a missing piece clicking into place. Because suddenly, I remembered something. Something I should have remembered before. I had been here before. I had taken this hike. With Jake. With Liv. With Eric. And none of us had made it out. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back, barely catching myself against a tree. The thing above us, the thing that wore my face, didn't move. It just watched, its too wide grin splitting my features in a way my own face never had. My mind reeled. The memory was there, just beneath the surface, slippery and wrong, like trying to hold on to a nightmare after waking up. I had been here before. We had all been here before. And something terrible had happened. Liv clutched my arm. "What the hell is that?" she choked out. Jake was shaking his head violently, his hands pressed to his temples. No. No, this isn't right. This isn't. He stopped, his breathing turning ragged. Why can't I remember? Eric grabbed my shoulder, his fingers ice cold. What do you mean we've been here before? I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. Because I still didn't know. The memories weren't fully there, just fragments, flashes of something dark, something hunting us, something tearing us apart. And then the thing in the tree laughed. Low. Wet. The sound of my own voice warping into something inhuman. It unfolded itself from the tree trunk, limbs bending at angles that made my stomach lurch. Slowly it descended, not climbing but flowing down like liquid shadow. I took a step back, and the second my boot touched the ground, I remembered everything. I remembered the first time we came out here, months ago, on another full moon night. I remembered hearing something in the woods. Seeing something. I remembered running. I remembered not getting away. Liv screamed, doubling over as the memories slammed back into her. Eric gasped, his eyes going wide with a terror I had never seen before. No. No, we left. But we hadn't. We died here. And somehow we had come back, thinking this was our first time. Jake turned toward me, face pale, lips trembling. How the hell are we still here? I didn't know. But the thing in the tree did. And it was still smiling. The thing that wore my face reached the ground, its feet making no sound against the dirt. It stood there, grinning, eyes locked on me. We don't belong here, I whispered. The thing cocked its head again, that sick, knowing tilt. No, it said in my voice. You don't. Liv was shaking violently. What is this? What the hell is this? Eric stumbled back, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. We can't. Jake turned in a slow circle, his hands twitching like he was trying to grab onto reality, to force it back into place. We left. I know we left. His voice cracked. We left. But we hadn't. The memory of it was so clear now. The first time, we had run. Just like tonight. We had gotten lost. Just like tonight. And then, something found us. I clenched my fists. We need to get out of here. The thing laughed. You can't. And I knew it was telling the truth. This wasn't just a place. It was a loop. A trap. A place where we had died and where we had been brought back, over and over again, to die all over again. How many times? I forced out. The thing just smiled. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just twice. Not just this time and the last. It had been dozens. Maybe hundreds. How many times had we come back here? Thinking it was the first time? Thinking we were just going on a fun little night hike. Jake grabbed my arm, his fingers ice cold. What do we do? I looked at him, and for the first time, I had no answer. Because how do you escape something? When you've already died in it? Then the thing spoke again. But this time, it didn't use my voice. It used Jake's. Run. And behind us, in the trees, something moved. Something big. Something that had been waiting. The air changed. It wasn't just heavy anymore, it was suffocating. Like the whole forest was breathing around us, closing in. Then I saw them. Not just one. Many. Shapes moving between the trees. Silent, shifting figures that blurred in and out of the darkness like they weren't entirely real. Some crawled. Some stood. Some hung from branches like marionettes with cut strings. And they all had our faces. Liv sobbed, backing away. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Eric had gone pale, his chest rising and falling in quick, panicked gasps. "This isn't happening. This isn't..." Jake grabbed me by the shoulders. "How do we stop this?" But I had no answer. Because now I remembered everything. The first time, we had run. The second time, we had fought. The third, we had hidden. None of it worked. Every single time, the things found us. And every single time, we died. This wasn't just a place where we had been trapped. It was a graveyard. And the copies, the things moving toward us, their bodies warped and wrong, they were us. Every failed attempt. Every version of us that hadn't made it out. Still here. Still watching. Still waiting for us to fail again. "Run!" The thing with my face said it again, its voice shifting, stretching. Then, in one awful, fluid motion, it lunged. I didn't think. I just moved. Grabbing Liv, yanking her forward. Eric and Jake were already sprinting. The forest exploded around us. The things came fast. Too fast. I could hear them, not just behind us but all around us, laughing, whispering, calling out in our voices. Calling our own names. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I didn't know if we could actually escape. But there was one thing I did know. I wasn't dying here again. Branches whipped against my arms, sharp enough to sting, but I barely felt them. My heartbeat was a war drum in my ears. I didn't dare look back. I already knew what I'd see ourselves. Twisted, hollow versions of us sprinting between the trees, moving too fast, their limbs bending at angles they shouldn't. And worst of all, the voices, our own voices, mocking us. "Run, run, run!" One of them giggled, a warped version of Liv's voice. "You never get away!" Another one whispered in my voice. Jake tripped. For one horrible second, I thought he was gone. But Eric grabbed his arm and hauled him back up. We kept running, lungs burning, legs screaming. The trail had disappeared beneath our feet, but I could feel something pulling at me, an instinct, a memory buried under all the terror. Because we had been here before. We had died here before. Which meant the only way out, the real way out, was something we had never tried. "Stop running!" I gasped. Liv nearly crashed into me. "What?" Eric spun around, panic wild in his eyes. "Are you insane?" "Trust me!" I screamed. "Just stop!" For half a second, no one moved. Then, we skidded to a stop, chests heaving, legs trembling. The things chasing us did too. Just as sudden. As if they didn't know what to do next. A cold realization crept up my spine. They only ever mimicked us. Every time we ran, they chased. Every time we fought, they tore us apart. Every time we tried to escape, they ended us. But now, we weren't playing our part anymore. The creatures stood just beyond the trees, their warped faces caught in moonlight. Their smiles faltered. Their heads twitched in jerky, unnatural movements, confused. I took a slow step forward. One of the copies, one that looked like Jake but wrong, its eyes too hollow, its grin too wide, took a step back. My stomach twisted. We had been feeding the loop this whole time. The only way out was to break it. Liv's voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do now?" I swallowed hard. And then I did something I never had before. I turned my back on them. And I walked. Every step felt like stepping off a ledge. I kept expecting them to attack, to grab us from behind, to drag us back into the cycle. But they didn't. They just watched. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, feel their hesitation, their confusion. We had never done this before. Every single time before, we had died running. Not this time. Jake was the first to follow. Then Liv. Then Eric. Step by step, we walked through the forest. The path wasn't there, but somehow, I knew we were headed the right way. The pull in my gut, the feeling that had led me to stop running in the first place, was guiding me forward. The whispers started again. Soft at first. Almost pleading. Come back. You don't belong out there. Stay with us. But we didn't listen. We just kept walking. And then, I saw it. A break in the trees. A thin sliver of something real, something that didn't belong to this nightmare loop. Moonlight spilled through the gap, illuminating asphalt. The trailhead. The parking lot. The real world. Liv made a strangled noise, half sob, half laugh. She ran. This time, we let her. We all did. The second my foot hit the pavement, something shifted. The weight, the suffocating heaviness of the woods had vanished. I gasped, feeling like I was breathing real air for the first time. Liv collapsed onto the ground, hands pressed to the cool asphalt, as if trying to convince herself it was real. Eric turned in a slow, jerky motion, looking back at the trees. Jake was already shaking his head. Don't. But I couldn't help myself. I looked too. And I saw them. Still standing at the tree line. Still watching. But now, they weren't smiling. They weren't moving. They were fading. One by one, our copies dissolved into the dark, slipping away like mist. The last one to disappear was mine. For a fraction of a second, we locked eyes. And it whispered something. So soft, I barely heard it. Next time, you might not remember. Then it was gone. The night was still. Silent. Normal. I turned back to the others. No one spoke. No one had to. We just got in the car. And we left. None of us ever hiked at night again. None of us ever talked about what happened. But sometimes late at night, when I close my eyes, I hear a whisper in my own voice. And I wonder how many other versions of us are still out there. Still stuck. Still waiting. And if someday, we'll wake up in the woods again, thinking it's our first time.